course, they can introduce themselves. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining. As mentioned in our conversations together, this roundtable is going to be focused around sort of culture and social leadership within your roles. So within not only your teams, but also the businesses that you've worked within. I don't know if we're all in the same order on each other's cameras, but if we could maybe go around and just sort of like an icebreaker, introduce ourselves, sort of where we work and what we do. That would be great. On my screen, Michael's first. So, Michael, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I can do that. My name is Michael. I am working for Interhyp. Interhyp. When you're in Germany and you bought a house, you probably know us. We are a mortgage broker. And what are we doing right now? Right now, the intents are pretty high, so it's not the best for our business. And so we actually have an hiring freeze, but we also want to bring new products to the market and be innovative. So what I'm currently doing, my role is head of engineering. I have 5 teams working with me, and right now I'm reorganizing my teams and adjust the focus of them to be to have a proper future. And since this is also a very emotional topic, I actually have a lot of one-on-ones with my engineers to get their feedback, to get their input, and to make this transition smoothly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, and Adrian, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Adrian. I'm originally from Argentina, and I work in Latin America, Europe, and America. I'm currently working in Habi. Habi is like the open door for Latin America with operation in Colombia and Mexico. My role there is CTO, but a bit weird because I manage product as well. So those type of CTO roles where you manage product and technology. And previously that, I was in Berlin working for Delivery Hero, working on the financial part of Delivery Hero, all the payment and some financial services that Delivery Hero had at some of the markets they operate.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Anne, would you be able to just sort of give a bit of background about yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Anne. Yeah, I'm in transition between 2 jobs. So like my former position, I was director of engineering for Blinkist. Blinkist is like a mobile first app, which is focused on learning opportunities and summarize books and podcasts and other formats. There, before I left, like we had, as many other startups, a situation that budget cuts, like cost was a bigger topic, also reducing the team. So like these were, I would say, like my last initiatives. And then when I left, Blinkist got acquired. So like this topic is, I think, still in the air for them, how to merge with Go1, which is the new owner. And yeah, in 2 weeks, I start my new adventure at the Quality Group. I'm one of the head of engineering there. We'll have like a team around like, I think like 50 people, but I'm not to 100% sure because it's still like, I didn't start it there yet. And they're like in the hyper growth stage. So it means like they, I think like in the beginning of this year, had an engineering team of like 10 people and now they are 105. So this is, and they even want to double themselves. So this is probably one of the topics I have in the next months on my table, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, that definitely sounds like it could be very exciting for you. And I know you have quite a big background in sort of rapidly hiring for teams. So yeah, it'd be great to sort of get your insight on that a bit later on. Satyajit, would you be able to kindly introduce yourself? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, the controls to unmute myself, right? Hi, I'm Satyajit. People usually find it difficult, so people call me Sat, and that's where you can also see the short form over there. I'm working with Solaris Bank. Almost now, it's going to be about 6 years. I'm the VP of engineering for a couple of product groups. Solaris Bank, for those of you who don't know, it's a bank. It's a B2B bank. It's a banking as a service company. We power people like Samsung in Germany, and not people, companies like Samsung in Germany, and a couple of other fintechs as well. I run a couple of product groups, the banking as a service, the lending portfolio, as well as the mobile applications. We've done one merger. We've had a hyper growth phase as well. But as I can see, read the room, right? We also last year we had to resize our teams, and we've also had budget cuts and trying to focus on profitability. It's going. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Satyajit. Tomasz has joined. But would you be able to introduce yourself?
Apologies for the delay. Discussing Stockholm strike issues.
Oh, okay. That's okay, Tomasz. No worries.
Yeah.
Since you're here, I don't know if Kumar is here, but would you be able to? So we're just going around. If that's okay, Tomasz, just introducing ourselves, a bit about what we do, where we work, and sort of, I guess, a bit about that. Would you be able to just give us a bit of context on yourself, Tomasz?
Yeah, sure. All right. So I'm Tomasz Dacewicz. I currently work at Klarna in the Berlin office. So I've been at Klarna as an engineering manager for the past 2.5 years. Working initially on a small team and now moving into group and also domain level topics as well as work streams throughout Klarna. Currently, I'm working with, let's say, merger and acquisition companies to try and bring the technologies from an acquired company into the Klarna universe. Also trying to bring the cultures of the people from the two different companies to align them. So that's just like a very quick overview of what I'm currently up to.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, that sounds perfectly relevant for this conversation then. Hopefully you'll be able to give a bit of insight on sort of how you work with mergers and acquisitions. Kumar, are you able to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Danny. Hello, everyone. Good evening. And I'm Kumar, and right now I am working as an engineering manager with Mcmakler. So Mcmakler, if you don't know Mcmakler, it's an immobilian, basically a property-based business. They call themselves as PropTech. So my task over here is that I manage and work with at least 3 teams over here, which deals in providing more.
I think he's frozen.
Sorry, it just kicks me out all the time. So this is the 3rd time I've been kicked out of this call. So apologies.
Oh no, that's okay.
So yeah. So I will start from the part wherein I was working. I am still working with Mcmakler, and I'm working with the team, 3 teams basically, which first deals with providing mortgage option to our customer. Our CEO of the company, Felix Jan, actually quite proudly announced that as 2-minute finance thing. So that was my team actually delivered that. Along with that, I'm working with 2 separate teams, which is related to our agents' efficiency. So we want to improve how exactly our brokers as well as our back office employees work, and how exactly we can improve their efficiency by introducing some AI features or improving their pipeline. So this is how exactly we function right now. Challenges wise, of course, this is quite tough market. There are quite fair amount of challenges which we see. There are pinches, but yet again, I feel that it is a kind of a common atmosphere across the board.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, I think everyone's sort of working with a few challenges at the moment with the current market, which obviously we can discuss, which I assume will sort of relate to the culture side of things. Finally, Sayak, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. First of all, hello everyone. Good evening. It was good to have all of you in this call and have a nice experience. Okay, so myself, Sayak, I'm in Berlin for a year now. I'm working as the director of engineering for Auto One, So those of you who are not aware of Auto1, it is the marketplace of used cars, and we have around 2% of the overall European share marketplace for used cars in Europe. So in Auto1, I'm responsible for mostly the tech teams managing the B2B side of the business and logistics. So in a way, this is a very niche domain. It's like building Amazon for used cars, which Amazon did 10 years back. We are trying to do this because generally this is a business which people mostly tend to do physically. Like we try to visit a branch, you inspect your car while buying or selling and do this negotiation on pricing and stuff. So doing something this in a complete virtual world online is a complete new experience and creating a new experience for users, right? So yeah, and that's all. And prior to this, I have mostly worked in the Asian market, working in India for the major e-commerce players like Amazon and others, and in Southeast Asia. Looking forward to discuss with you all and learn from this session. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Sayak. Sayak's kindly sort of going to help me facilitate the conversation. In terms of obviously the reason we're all in this conversation is because we do a lot of work in regards to sort of culture and leading our teams. In terms of sort of the first conversation or topic of conversation, it was quite centered around the idea of mergers and acquisitions. I know obviously, Tomasz, you mentioned that is sort of your main role at the moment, and Satyajit, you've done a lot of that, and also Anne as well. So it'd be great to sort of open it up to the floor, sort of get an idea of sort of the merger and acquisitions everyone's dealt with, sort of how they've dealt with the culture side of things, organizing that, and then also how they've sort of, if they've faced any challenges, if there's anything that they've sort of dealt with in relation to that.
Oh, that can open up.
Okay, perfect.
All right, not a problem. Okay, so Klarna in the past 2 years has acquired quite a few companies, as Klarna's also, if everyone's been keeping track of what Klarna's been doing, is they're moving into more of a shopping domain and a shopping app. So banking is still the core functionality and payments, but they would like to expand into the universe of payments and making a one-stop shop, so to say. And during this time, over the past few years, Klarna has basically acquired multiple companies which are enabling this. One of those, which I'm currently working with, is also StoreCard. It's a German-based startup, which was started in Mannheim, I think it was 12 years ago, where they basically provide digitized catalogs to consumers on an app, as well as with loyalty cards. And so basically just a one-stop place to organize your personal shopping and things like that, as well as targeting based on your location, digitized catalogs. So with that merger and acquisition comes the challenges of actually trying to take that success that application has done into the Klarna universe. Also, it's got to do a lot with the technological side as well as the cultural side, as the cultures are different. There's different ways of working, different rituals, which are followed in both ways. There's also a different mindset coming from, let's say, a startup atmosphere where there's basically, I would say, more like a free-for-all where the engineers and the leads were able to build what was needed at the time as quickly as possible, where they come into a very structured organization, let's say, that is seen as a bank still, because there is a banking license, and there is a lot of procedures to go through to actually release something. So that's from more of a technical side, but from the cultural side, you also had the mindset of people focusing and working in that way. And then when you introduce them to an environment that is a lot more structured and needs a lot more structure, you have, let's say, conflict of interest between the firms. This is not within our domain that we're working. We have 5 merger and acquisition companies, and I'm currently working with the StoreCard acquisition to try and bring the functionality from that into the Klarna universe and to mimic the success that application has had within the Klarna application. So yeah, the challenges are a constant battle. I've actually done a conference talk, lightning talk about it as well, about how to manage those cultures with some strategies around it. I've put it into play. I've done it with 2 groups right now to try and merge them and trying to figure out what it's going. it seems to starting to work, and the people are starting to work together, but there are still pushbacks when there are challenging times. So yeah, that's like a introduction to what I'll be doing as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Thomas. So yeah, it definitely sounds like, well, especially with merging companies that are sort of similar in regards to what they do, but a lot of different in regards to the way that they work. Just sort of, yeah, making sure you don't lose the culture for both companies and that everyone's sort of happy working together. I know, Satyajit, you wanted to speak there about sort of your time with Solaris Bank.
Indeed, but maybe could I ask a few questions to Tomasz?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Go for it.
Curious, right? Because I mean, context. Yes, we also did. We recently, like 2 years back, acquired a company in the UK, and we've had some interesting experiences. I might have missed it out, but did you talk about the technology stack? Are they similar, or did you have a completely different technology stack?
Well, in terms of the technology stacks, the underlying technologies and the tools that we used were very similar. But you also have to remember that a lot of the procedures and things that Klarna has in place for allowing software to be released because of the compliance rules that need to be done for right to be forgotten, and no leakage of any information that needs to go through. So it goes through a large scrutiny. In the smaller startups, which I've noticed, there isn't really that in-depth analysis of every technology that you use. And what was found that some of the technologies that were used are not compatible with the compliance laws that are within there. So there's a lot of exceptions that need to go in place to do that. I've been working with the teams recently as well, looking at the whole technology stack and asking the question, do we migrate the system or do we decommission the system and rewrite it from scratch? Because what I've realized is a lot of the systems that were built, they were built for a specific application, on a specific stack, on a specific technology. And that does not work really well, let's say, in the Klarna universe that we have with that technology stack. So there's a balancing act and a lot of understanding of business requirements as well as technical requirements to see, do we migrate or do we rebuild? And most of the time, the answer, I would say 80% of the time to 90% of the time, at this point in time, the answer is rebuild, because it's quicker, and the people that are actually building it, they have the knowledge, and the mistakes that were made in the original system can be mitigated in the new system.
Most of it you would rebuild. And have you started the process of rebuilding it? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And so once you rebuild, do you actually then migrate the customers over to the newly built system? Okay.
Yeah, this is like a strategy that is being put in place, and how to do this, because moving millions of customers from one application to another application means that you're probably going to lose 95% of your customers because the applications look completely different. So you somehow have to, let's say, work on both applications so that they look very similar, so that the user experience doesn't, let's say, change too large when moving the one to the other one. And this becomes a very big challenge when you do this, because you need to support two apps, right? You need to support the old app, which is actually running, which is working, which is generating revenue, as well as then trying to mimic that success and bring those customers over to your new app. So you have a lot of challenges and a lot of, let's say, grinding of gears to try and get it to work correctly.
Indeed. The reason I ask is that we also went in a very similar route. So I'm coming from Solaris Bank. We're a API bank, right? So we are not necessarily dealing with end customer applications. Still, partners do need to interact with us. So we acquired a company called Competence in the UK, which is also a not necessarily a bank, but they have a banking license, an EMI license. And we've been talking about, I mean, it's been a 2-year journey for us. A couple of struggles that we had was also the technology stack. So we are primarily an AWS and modern languages like Go and even Elixir, right? Which I want to get, I shouldn't say much over here because it's still, we're in the process of migrating away. But we also had this so the Competence was predominantly a .NET stack with, they're still on a private cloud. and deploying things over there, and a very different cycle of development, a very different way of development. And then we've been looking at how do we merge these two different technology stacks and different ways of working, and we came to the same conclusion. So we have a migration, we are rebuilding it, basically merging it into the stack that we have in Solaris Bank, but building around the functionalities that's been missing from the previous one. And that was definitely the easier route to go. With the same, you still do have that domain knowledge, which we want from the engineers who have been working for quite some time in Qantas. And they've been picking up technology. So quite a lot of different of the engineers moved into Go. Quite a lot of them moved into Java and other technologies. There's still some who are reluctant and want to stay with the .NET world, which we're still looking at how to work out.
Well, like, I fully understand that. I don't know if I agree. Our first initial strategy was to, migrate and destroy basically the systems, because we had security policies and things that needed to be in place and certain things. Like, put a document together and put like a 5-step process of showing, like, okay, what is the initial thing that needs to go? Where do we need to first initially work? What is the core system that needs to go? What are the underlying branches of the systems that need to be migrated, so that we can actually do it, in a smart way and not migrate to kill? Because migrating to kill would have taken us 2 years, and we would have wasted that time, right? And migrating all your services and dumping them and then trying to figure out if they work, if they don't work, is not going to save anything, right? So I do agree, right? Moving it across, we also didn't have much of the challenges of a .NET environment going to a JavaScript environment, which is also different in your aspect, right? But that also poses the challenges, right? You got to understand, you got to balance the act, and then you got to say, okay, where's the business value coming from, right? Is it still generating business value that I can still maintain it, and there's still people that do have the .NET knowledge and have the insights to actually maintain it and to move it forward while it's sunsetted? Or do I refocus them into the new system and bring more value there, right? So it's a balancing act that requires a lot of, let's say, stakeholder management to understand where your business is and what are your priorities.
Indeed.
Okay, I should give the microphone to someone else as well.
Okay, I have one question for both Sat and Tomasz. Since it's an interesting one, because Sat, you have already completed one similar integration, as you said, right? Almost 2 years.
It's not completed, it's still in the process. 2 years still in the process.
Still in the process, yeah. And Tomasz, you just started, right? So when we do this kind of a merger, there is always a stakeholder expectation that, hey, I did it, and maybe I want to see immediate results. So how do you plan that such integration will take 2 years? I mean, how do you manage stakeholders in such cases?
Well, I could start with that, because I already touched on that point. I already touched on that point with the with the plan that I put together. So basically, I presented a plan to the CTO of Klarna saying, right, we're not going to merge and dump. We're going to actually do it in a proper way, right? So it was basically aligning with all the stakeholders that are involved. Once we had identified, let's say, in the old system, which systems are the ones that we will be responsible for within my teams, within my groups, and grouped them into certain aspects and presented that and said, all right, this is what the core functionalities are. What can we take over which will work? What are the things that are available for us to work within the new system that don't need to be migrated, that don't need to do that? And it's still an ongoing process of, let's say, stakeholder management. But one of the things is that we actually did release an MVP at the beginning of the year. And surprisingly, we've had over 6,000% traction on the numbers that are coming in, right, for releasing it, right? So there's a big push to get this in, right? But that push is, we need to migrate a lot of data, we need to migrate a lot of the systems. But we did set up that plan and manage those stakeholder expectations, saying, right, our initial plan is to build this initial system. So we're building an MVP. Then we're building, let's say, we're going to automate this whole process, and then we're going to start with the core functionality, and we're going to start with that. And this is aligning a lot with with the business side of things. So when we're designing the new models within Klarna, what they want to do, we learned from the mistakes and sat down in a room for 2 days drawing boxes about how the business model is going to look, running through scenarios, running through user cases, user stories, defining a vision, defining a mission, so that everyone and all our stakeholders were aligned on what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And then we could start putting timelines according to what the size of the complexity is of that system that we're taking across against what is available and what we can use, as well as aligning with the, let's say, future vision of where Klarna wants to go. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe one follow-up question here is that, I mean, every company have there's a constant inflow of new features, right? Which business wants to implement, experiment with. So when you are working in such a integration phase, it's like you are porting existing features from another application to your stack, right? So, and we all have limited inflow of new features versus this porting. And how does this work? Is it 80-20, 50-50? What according to your experience, it works? Yeah.
Well, to my experience, a lot of pushback, as well as them prioritizing what has the biggest business value, right? We've done this quite a few times. I've also had challenging situations with engineers where we've had rotations within the team. Certain work had to be picked up by other people and the knowledge wasn't there. So it's just basically managing those stakeholder expectations and then prioritizing what is coming in. We have a lot of things coming in right now that need to be focused and prioritized to be delivered, let's say, before peak season, right? Before Black Friday and before Christmas, right? So we have to shift our focus. We have to be very agile in this environment, but we also have to set realistic expectations, right? And this is the one thing that that we learned very, very early in this process is set your expectations, set what you're capable of doing, and identify the risks that are involved as quickly as possible so that you can notify all your stakeholders saying, this is a risk. If it appears, then we will delay, right? But what I've learned is that it's just stakeholder management and expectation management. And then when things and priorities come from above or from management that they want something, right, that's where you have to be a lot more agile and you have to put plans in place very quickly to identify how you can build that as quickly as possible or how you can deliver that feature as quickly as possible without going too much off the track of what you're doing, right? So finding the synergy between what is the priority as well as what you need to do, maybe shifting a little bit of focus on a feature that you were planning to do in let's say 2 months or 3 months, and shifting that slightly forward so that you can actually align with stakeholders.
Indeed, right. I can add to that. We've recently had we had a very clear direction. We've actually changed course twice during this year. First was to leave it as it is, and then the second one was we realized it's actually better to actually merge it into one platform. But having a clear target or what we wanted to achieve helped us to actually navigate things that came along. But there are some things that we had to be, you have to think about it at the end of the day. For example, we had a few of the regulations from the central bank coming along that we needed to actually implement. Now, these are things that you don't have a choice. You have a deadline which needs to be completed before this. So then it's basically trying to reprioritize and saying, this is the value that this is what we need to do, and we have to bring it across. There was another thing that was very critical that we needed to get it done, and then we had to reprioritize, right? At the end of the day, it's actually managing expectations with your stakeholders, different stakeholders. You have business partners, business stakeholders, partners. There's also regulatory parts of it that we need to actually satisfy. So definitely meeting expectations.
Great. This is really good learning. Is there anything else others would like to know from Tomasz? Probably should that we have the knowledge experts here.
I would really love to hear from other people as well.
So maybe I'll start with some of my experience, and maybe I'll just try to pitch in a different kind of view about this merger and acquisition part. in my life. I think it's like 14 years in this industry, and I have seen 3 mergers and acquisition, both in the bigger companies, startup level companies, and one thing is quite common, like these always follow one common thing. Business priorities definitely are there, plus also managing people's expectation, because you have to manage both things in a way. I was at GE Capital, and this part of GE Capital was being acquired by Wells Fargo back in 2015-16 timeframe, and that was kind of very interesting because these were like multi-billion-dollar companies, and they were literally giants. Now the challenge was that how exactly the businesses should align, and that's what they did, and they did it wonderfully, because what they did was that they had the leadership sit down and understand what exactly the priority of the common or the both companies should be, because this is now Wells Fargo was completely different ballgame. They were different in their whole way of working. GE Capital was completely differently, working differently. Yeah. So that's what the leadership did. They sat down, ultimately figured out what exactly the common priority or core priority of this common team would be. And ultimately, they had this organization, like they had the transition process kind of set up that, okay, this is how we would proceed. First, there would be some meetings wherein we would figure out what our core value is. We should put some KPIs against each of the culture markers. And ultimately, one thing was done very right over there was having a very clear communication with all employees that what exactly is going on. Because the problem which I see during these merger and acquisition is that there are a lot of unknown, and people don't work well with unknown. Yeah, there's a fight and flight kind of situation always happens. So this is quite important that they should know the things they should know about, because they have actually put in their years of work for their respective organization, and this is something that they cannot deal with. So something that has to be done, and I think Wells Fargo and GE did it pretty well there. So I saw this thing a couple of times here as well. I was head of engineering at Pilot GmbH. It was merged with Penta FinTech, and different story. But the baseline remained the same. Communications were made pretty much clear. Business priorities were set. Timelines, yes, as Satya was saying, as Tomasz also said that, okay, you have to do the tweaks and adjustment as you fly. And this is quite normal. This happens because things can come, things can change. Your core priority should be there, but also you should keep an eye over the price, the immediate issues, threats, price, however you can call it. And you have to make some adjustments so that you can get through the phase of this transition. So this is what my take is about this merger and acquisition, and also trying to maintain this cultural phase within this joint company. Any questions?
Has anyone? Sorry.
Yeah, others, anyone? If anyone.
I want to ask a question, actually, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Kumar, how did you, especially such a large merger and acquisition, right? There's definitely going to be people who are not necessarily aligned on the business outcomes or business goals, right? And it's always going to be there, right? Like you, however small it is, right? So what were could you remember or could you think about how these were dealt with? Like, I mean, it's okay to not agree on certain things, right? But the outcome can go in different ways. People can quit. One of the big risks is, okay, how much of that attrition can we actually swallow, and how much can we actually say that's fair, right? But then there's also leadership that quits, and then you have a whole line of other people following that leader. So how was that dealt with?
Great question. And actually, you would see this kind of problem happening in the bigger organization, wherein the white is pretty much there, wherein there is a kind of hoops and loops, and there are levels wherein if somebody says something and it is not translated properly to different levels, things gets lost very easily. So what exactly they did was that first is, as I was saying, the core values. They always played on the core values that, what exactly we want from this. So the one which I was working for, that was G Capital, they were into the lending business, and Wells Fargo was completely a bank. Yeah. And they wanted to acquire this whole business and wanted to make this one of their own, like going forward from there. So idea was quite clear, but the question was how. And this is where they engaged people. What they did was smart. They never said that. They just put the point that, okay, we want this to happen, and you decide how exactly you're going to do it, and you give us the estimates as well as how the whole process would be, because both of the companies have their own expertise and understanding about the system. Our problem was from GE Capital, the whole system was at least 20 years old. And merging it with like Wells Fargo's brand new build system, which was working with Microsoft's systems in the background, it was like you are talking you're comparing dinosaur with something else. It is that kind of different. Yeah? So yes, and that's what the thing is. You actually motivate people. You put a challenge in front of them, and also what you do is that you inform people at every level that, okay, that this is what exactly is going on. This is how this leadership team is handling this particular problem, and let them decide how you want to proceed on this. Of course, you have to put in KPI. You cannot let things go, or else like everybody will start to do their things. And also the leadership was kind of smart enough wherein they had this regular check-in that how things are going from both the companies' perspective, because there was a fair bit of time between these companies started to merge. It was almost like a year time frame wherein the leaders started to meet, discuss, decide. The team meetings started to happen, wherein meet and greet used to happen. And after that, every plan started, wherein leaders started to discuss and decided, okay, what's right for the given situation, because something may not be right for Wells Fargo or something may not be right for G Capital. So there were a lot of this argument. There were a lot of like happy and sad moments. But yet again, when they came out of that discussion, it was a common win for both these companies.
Okay.
Sorry for the long answer.
Thank you, Kumar. I think unless anyone else has something to add in regards to their experience of working with mergers, acquisitions, and culture, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm aware that the time's moving on, so maybe we can move towards sort of the subject of working with teams that are maybe not at the moment with the current market, but previously sort of rapidly expanding your teams and growing your teams. Sort of how you sort of find people and how you merge that culture in that way. Sorry, the lights turned off, but if anyone has anything to do with that, then that would be great.
I'll let other people talk, please. I work a lot with the teams in terms of that culture. I recently did a group day where I had roughly around 23 people from different from the merger acquisition and the Klarna side, and working with them to try and basically set it up in three ways: is what are their expectations, managing their expectations, doing exercises around this about what do they expect from the leaders, what do they expect from the group that they're in, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, basically doing a SWOT analysis with them, as well as then reflecting on what they've achieved and where they want to go. So it was just trying to build the relationships within the trust. There is a fantastic book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I don't know if anyone's read it. Yeah, I see nodding, yes. I use that very often in all the exercises that I do, and I do build that trust, and I think that is the foundation for anything that is happening here. And Kumar also said that communication. I say communication is one of the key things. It's an open communication with that trust that builds the bonds that you need to actually build upon the culture within the teams and bring the teams together to find a common ground to stand on and to build upon. That's what I've been doing with multiple teams over the past 2 years.
get communication is one of the biggest things. I didn't do any merchant acquisition M&As, so that was why I was so silent in the first part. But I built up some teams, and communication is one thing. Transparency is another thing. That everyone has the same information, that everyone can decide or is included in decisions, and how the product works, and how what are the next steps are. And another thing is I hired for culture and not for technical skills, because I think that you can learn the technical skills, but the culture is it's more difficult to change. So in every hiring process, I had 2 team members also in the calls, in the interviews, to be sure that there's a fit.
I just want to add to that, because I also do a lot of hiring as well, and my approach to actually hiring is also culture. And the one thing I usually ask when I go into every interview is, can I work with this person? That's my first question when I walk into an interview. Can I work with this person? And I fully agree with you, Michael.
Yeah, I can also add to that. So basically, one of my secrets of hiring is also to put a dedicated slot for culture fit, or at least like at Blinkist we did that. And I'm looking forward to hopefully implement the same strategy for quality group. Because yeah, I don't want to repeat what already was said, but like at the end of the day, it's way more difficult to kind of like shape cultural behavior rather than introducing or pairing on the technical side with people. So from that perspective, I think like it's really essential. Also like from the hiring part, like what I did with my teams was basically profiling a bit, like how is your current team structured, and really understand what kind of, like also from the personality, not only from the technical perspective, like what kind of profiles do you have already in your team and what do you need now? Because at the end of the day, at least for my teams, it didn't work if I have like only extroverts, like from a specific specialty there. It was really necessary that the team leads or me, depending a bit like who was a hiring manager, has like a really good understanding what kind of puzzle piece do I need now. And then from my point of view, like hiring is really fast. If you really understand, like, do I need a middle piece, or like I'm looking for a corner from my puzzle to really find these people, to challenge them or really get to know them during the interview process, or cultural understanding, what kind of expectations do they have when they join your teams from the cultural perspective, to understand a bit like if it's working or not, and then ideally perceiving it or even scaling it. So because everyone who's joining, right, brings in a different kind of perspective. Even though you have defined core values, it's changing because like culture is made by the people who are joining us. Just wanted to add these 5 cents here.
Maybe I will slightly move away from the culture point to it is part of culture, but I think it's when you said technology, I'm assuming it's about the languages, right? Because I think there's also the whole ability to understand how to solve a problem, right? Which is not culture, but that's actually technology. I mean, so a bit of a background, right? So I joined Solaris when we were about 100 people, and we've now about more than 1,200 people, around 1,200 people. And I've set up an organization in India. We scaled from 0 to 50 people the last year. And in Solaris itself, I've grown teams from about 20 to now we are, I think, all of engineering about 300 people. So this scale, of course, it's just not me, but it's a couple of other VPs who've been involved in scaling this, right? One of our biggest challenges has been how do we get the right set of people across the company, right? Because it's easy to, I don't know, right? What I've observed is when I used to be an engineering manager, it was super easy to actually hire for my team. I would spend a lot of time hiring for the team. Then when you're trying to scale it across the company, it becomes a challenge. And we also have, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with what we've spoken about. We have a separate round, 1 hour session just to understand the mindset of the person. Do they actually fit into the company, right? The culture is such an important part. On the other side, I feel that, when we look at the technology part of it, we definitely started looking at how do we find the right mindset for technology, right? You don't need to be the Java expert, you don't need to be the Go expert, but you need to be able to understand how to solve problems, and not just solve problems for the sake of, oh, this is a cool algorithm, let me try to figure this out, right? I've been an engineer myself for a very long time, and I like solving problems. And give me a new library, I want to experiment with it, right? So how do we bring those people who want to actually solve the business problem that we have? Right? We have this something that we want to define, and how do you actually get an engineer to solve that? And I feel that is also a big part. So we have culture, and we have this technological mindset that needs to be merged in with this, right? And then it needs to be across I don't know how you do it, and I'm curious how you do it. How do you solve? We don't want one team that is working really well and another team that is not necessarily doing so well because we've had the wrong people across these teams. Yeah. What do you think about it?
Probably, let me take this. I think culture also very much depends on the nature of the product or the business the companies deal with. Okay, so let me take an example. For example, I started as an engineer in one of the storage companies. Okay, so while we're building products for a storage company, it's like when you ship a box, there is no chance to rectify the product, right? You ship a box maybe few thousand kilometers away to some data centers, and if there is some bug or something, you lose the complete deal, right? So while we're working in such a storage company or storage product, the tolerance of error is very low. So any solution you build is likely to be so much thorough in terms of memory, in terms of stuff, right? So while I was working on such companies, it's like I couldn't afford to have a single bug, okay? You need to do the thorough analysis and stuff. So when I moved from such a setup to Amazon, right, it's a completely different setup. So initially, the culture is completely different because all things are in cloud. Okay, even if there's a bug, you can release a patch in a few hours, in the same day might be, right? So if you look at, when I was having my Amazon interview maybe some 12 years back, they look for certain qualities in the people. Okay, and that's how their hiring is different than others. Okay, because they also hire from people from other domains. They necessarily don't hire everyone from e-commerce, right? So they look for certain qualities, so which they call it fail fast, right? So fail fast means that how quickly a person can think of a solution. It might not be 100% accurate. It might be 70%, 80%, but can he think fast for a complete unknown problem? So in their interview process, they evaluate like that way. And I think nowadays many other companies also started doing the same way. And the other part is, it's often easy that when we try to answer about things which we have solved in the past, but in our e-commerce or this kind of current challenging environments, every day we are solving unknowns. There are many things which probably we have not solved. Maybe there are some Kubernetes clusters that can be troubleshooting. Many of the engineers have never done. They need to do some browsing or talk with in-support people and other people to collaborate, blogs, Twitter, whatnot, and get it done, right? So how people can collaborate and get things delivered in a positive way, in a complete stressed environment. They don't get overwhelmed and all. So in a nutshell, what I want to say is that it's essential for a company to assess what are the qualities in a people they want, and in the hiring process, evaluate if these people already have these qualities or can they adopt these qualities over a period of time, right? And if that is doable, it's all good, because languages are changing. Every 3 years, 2 years, it's getting refreshed. So having someone from a specific language might not be the right strategy going forward. Yeah, those are my 2 cents here.
Yeah, I want to add to Sat's comment. So I think that I agree with you, Sat, that for me it's more important to really having people that really knows the fundamentals, that really knows what computer science is about, than, has the last language knowledge of the last technology, because you can learn it. So we live in a world where knowledge is perishable. So that's why when young people came to me and said, what is your advice? I always say, invest on knowing the fundamentals, because the fundamental has been the fundamental for the last 50 years, 60 years, and most likely will be with us for the next 20, 30, 40. I don't know, but most likely will be there. So instead of wasting time on just learning one language, and something that I see a lot in Latin America, I don't know other places, but it's that there is a lot of academy that say, okay, you became a full stack developer in 1 year. So, well, come on. So you're not most likely going to become a full stack senior developer in a year, because, and those learning strategy, generally speaking, doesn't pay attention to the fundamental. And they go right to the IDE and start throwing code with very little fundamental. So that's why I think that having people that really understand the fundamental, for me, is critical. And I prefer rather that than someone that really knows the language we are working on. Because most likely we will going to change in a year, or if you had the fundamentals, in 2 weeks' time, you will be perfectly proficient on that new language for you.
I fully agree with Adrian as well. I think the fundamentals are important, as well as to add on to what Sat was also saying, is that problem solving is the key. So if you have the fundamentals, you can solve most problems that you're faced. I think with experience, and everyone who's here has the experience that with the fundamentals, the problems that are coming are easier and easier to solve with the experience that you gain throughout the years. Right? And that's what I also look for when I interview people is, are they able to solve the problem? Are they able, and just to see them how they work in a normal environment. I usually during the interview, I try to make it more like a pair programming session with them so that I could see how they solve the problem rather than testing their in-depth knowledge, as was said. So, yeah, I fully agree with what is going around the table today.
We did an experiment once where we had a pull request open, and we had the engineer sit down and talk about the pull request with us. I think that was really nice. It never got pulled into the official interview process, but this opened up an entire communication line. So you could see whether, she or he is actually understanding what's going on, is able to communicate nicely about, oh, this is just ridiculous, right? Like you have sometimes things on the pull request that's some really snarky comments. So you try to get this conversation out. Have you tried something really, off the blue, right? Like rather than sitting down, you told me about code, pair programming, right? Maybe anything else like that?
I don't know if it's the same, but what I like to do in interviews was to face the other people with our problems and look if they can solve our problems. You see if they have the skills, and in the best case, you also solved your own problem. So it was a win-win situation in that one.
Yeah, we basically have like a standard set of, because our interview process goes along the lines of, there's a coding challenge, which is quite standard, and then there's an architectural design, which is quite standard. But then we get to like the behavioral interview. This is what Anne was talking about as well, is where we start asking questions about how you solve problems. Have you had difficult situations? How do you manage, the team that you're in, and so on. So we have a whole structured set of questions which we can ask and dig deeper into how the person behaves as well. That does help in terms of like aligning that and getting that information.
And this is where I agree most of the time, and we do the same thing. We have a long list of questions that we use, right? And does it necessarily, I haven't actually looked into the data to see how many of the people that we have actually pulled in have we actually let go before the probation ends because of behavioral challenges, right? But is there any other way to assess behavioral challenges, right? Because if you ask me, how do you generally do something during your workday, I would be very polite. I would be really nice, right? Like, give me an experience, right? You could think about the STAR methodology to say, give a situation, explain how you did it, right? Of course, me as an interviewer, I'm going to be as nice as possible and try to avoid all of those challenging bits, right? Or whether I've been nasty, right? how do you assess somebody is a perfect fit by just questioning them?
The thing is, you can't.
Yeah.
There's no way. You have to see how they work in the working environment. You have to, and this is why we have a probation, right? I've had situations where the interviews went fantastic. This was before ChatGPT, where you could answer the questions very nicely. But now but we did see the challenges that were faced. It was just not the right cultural fit. But that's what we have the probation for, right? That's why we have that buffer.
Sat, I will add, I try to deep dive on problems or situations that didn't go well, and try to ask how that person managed that situation, and try to go really deep on that for two different reasons. And depending on the role, if you are a manager, if you are a developer, because it gives you a lot of information about the seniority of the person, because depending on how well the person can understand and can reflect on what went wrong, what went well, I think that you can really know if the person has enough deep knowledge about the problem. And if you are on the managerial side and the person was managing, or at least had some leading role on that incident, on that project that failed or whatever, okay, you can really assess on a real case how that person behaved when things are not well. Because when everything is okay, it's easy to behave well. But when things derail, okay, how you behave. So I think that that's, even though I agree with Tomasz that it's impossible to really predict, I think that it has helped me to really highlight some good attitudes or not as good, at least based on the culture of the company I was working on. And that really helped me a lot. So I invest more time dealing on the interviews on fail, mistake, problems, projects that didn't went well, than, okay, let's try me show what you know. So I use that a lot, and honestly, it has been very beneficial.
I would like to add one more point over here. Like, of course, that is very much important that person should be doing his bit right, but also the motivation factor comes in, because let's face it, everybody joins a company, they do have some sort of expectation. They want to grow, they want to learn things, they want to do the right thing. But the whole motivation fails if they don't find their surrounding to be right. They don't find that they have enough challenges. They don't find that the environment is not right. So I believe is one of the things as a leader to create that kind of environment wherein people can like freely express their opinion, of course, in a respectful manner, and also feel empowered to do their things in the right way. Of course, probation period is important, wherein I generally keep an eye over the new recruits that, okay, how exactly they are engaging with the team, what kind of problems they are solving, and what are their approaches are, because this helps. The small things actually gives away that how exactly the person would be behaving for like coming sometime for the companies, because things can change and we are people unpredictable on the core. So this is something very much important that, of course, we do have expectation from people to do their things right, but also as a leader, it's very much important to set the environment right, set the expectations right, give them all the right tools so that they can do their things right. But yes, of course, we do have got black sheeps, and I think that it's very much important to identify and do that corrective measures when we have time at hand.
Okay, I will probably add one point here. It's like this is definitely a difficult thing. There is no single answer for it, right? But over the last 5-6 years, when I mostly hire my EMs, I personally feel that if you talk nicely, the response will be also a very nice one, right? And it's very hard to find the gaps. So it's essential to find that how the person is communicating in a difficult situation, okay? Because as a leader, you need to communicate or differences. I mean, in an organization, you will have differences in tech solutions or with business stakeholders, someone or other at some point. And how effectively one communicates the difference or breeds the difference makes sense. So I try to probe or discussing situations where there is a difference, or maybe I at times whenever solutions I propose, I give completely a wrong solution or completely wrongly. I mean, which may look to them that, hey, this guy is so foolish. I mean, why is he at all saying it? But if someone can deal that situation, I mean, he's a fit for me, because as part of it, at some point, he will face a similar situation. And if he cannot deal that, he is not a right leader for the team, right? I mean, often maybe as a junior, I can ask for that. Hey, I need so many leaves, and the team has a release in next 2 days, right? And if he cannot convince in a measurable way, so he's not the right fit for the team that way. So I feel, I mean, the way you ask the question, you will get a response in the same way. So it's essential that in the interview process, if this can be simulated, which definitely comes from experience from this table from all of us, at least some glimpses can and this can definitely be seen.
I would like to add something to that, because I know you can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry. Adrian is behind my picture and I saw that he is muted. So somehow I thought like for a second, oh, that's my screen. I think what we missed so far is maturity. So like, at least like for me, you know, like we have different levels when we hire. I can hire or can decide, you know, like I want to hire like an experienced engineer manager because, you know, this is what the specific dedicated team needs, or because I'm so busy, I can't invest at the moment the time to really go into a hand holding and coaching and training, because I don't know, like different situation from the current product or business situation. It, you know, like we always go to different like phases. So, and this is what I meant in the beginning when I said like I profile my my roles before I even start hiring, because like for me it's essential, you know, like how much time can I invest, or either, you know, like for the engineering teams, like my engineer managers can invest, and based on that, and also like how the team is distributed, we identify what kind of level do we need. And for my expectations, you know, like if I'm hiring for a mid-level or like a junior, I'm not expecting them, you know, like that they can solve all the problems. So what we just discussed, for me, it's more about like, how do they behave? You know, like, are they super eager to learn? Are they able to early enough raise their hands if they are stucking and reaching out for helps and collaborate? So I think like this is also really essential to identify like, which stage are we, or is a specific team in, and now like what can we as leads, because we are all leads here now, like can we provide as a system in terms of like coaching, training them, and then on the other hand, like yes, we have the promotion period, and it's great that we have that. I'm trying always to empower everyone who is around these new hires, so that we have like really frequent feedback loops, that we collect data, that it's not all like on the shoulders of the engineer manager or hire manager to identify this. And while, you know, like all the other employees are constantly kind of like asked to evaluate, give feedback, it's, at least like from my experience, easier because they also get more mature in there. If you have to judge like, hey, the senior Android developer who's just joined our team, you know, like, is he doing a proper job? Is he meeting up all expectations, what we kind of like have defined on like what we are expecting on the certain level? Somehow, you know, like if you want to give proper feedback, which is constructive and so on, you reflect on your own work, or like really gather data, ideally, you know, like if I'm seeing that, I'm trying always to correct that or motivate teams like, hey, it's not only about like, do we like this coffee chat with this person? It's about like really evaluating like the skill sets here. But I thought like this was like a bit missing, or maybe, you know, like everyone had this in their head, but like we didn't express it verbally, that like we have different levels, and like this also, it's important to make separations, because it's impossible for like someone fresh from university to be like on the same level like a staff engineer.
Indeed, right. Indeed. Thanks for bringing that up, right? I think, especially with managers, right? I mean, finding experienced managers is a challenge, and of course, then based on how much of time we would have, we would be able to actually figure which person gets where. Maybe one question to you, and I'm sorry, I'm asking also questions while we're doing this, right? But how about more junior roles, right? Like, because over the years, I've generally not hired junior managers. What I've done is I've made like maybe a tech lead move into a manager role, right? So grown managers internally for more junior roles. Have you had experience hiring basically from outside very junior managers, and what was your experience on that?
Yes, I also did both. So like hiring or like growing internally and giving the opportunities for people who are interested in leadership to try this out and ideally staying on this path and enjoying it. But yeah, hiring from outside, it's also possible. It's all about like the expectations you have. And then for me, to be honest, like in my interviews, I challenge a lot the motivation why people enter the leadership path, because like very often, or at least like maybe I'm only meeting these people, I have like very often conversations where people go in this direction because they have wrong expectation, but at the end of the day is a leadership role. Like they have way less expectation on like how often you deal with people problems, and not many of us are really enjoying it. And like if I'm catching this, and this is what I'm stressing out, it's the same like I have a tiny dog. She's sleeping here, so otherwise I would show you Fina to the camera. But like it's the same, you know. Like sometimes people like, I want a dog, and like my first reaction is always like convincing them why they shouldn't have a dog or why they don't want to have a dog. And I'm having the same approach actually when I'm hiring, like let's say like junior or not so much experienced leads, because I'm trying to convince them, like, yeah, but are you really sure? And like really draw them like a real picture of like how it is, what they have to, how day to day looks like, and all this kind of stuff. And like if they pass that and they're like still motivated and still interested, then for me usually these are the people which fit into my team. But then it's also clear that I have to dedicate a lot of time for my time in the beginning, because I want that they all have like a great experience in terms of like getting trained, but also about like that I have an equal knowledge system within my engineer manager team. And then on the other hand, when I work at Blinkist, like for a while, like before I got my director promotion, I was like very long like head of QA, and we were like kind of like we had iOS and head of Android team, and everyone from us was like kind of like this lonely wolf, you know, like everyone was like kind of like doing their own stuff. Yeah, we met in meetings, but we didn't realize that we were very often solving the same problems, you know, like just in a different platform or like environment. And that's why I created a peer group. It's like in the beginning we were joking around, like, hey, the anonymous alcoholics, you know, like it's just, you know, like for us or like heads somehow. And it took a while until, you know, like this really got rolling. It's somehow like very similar how we are sitting here, only, you know, the difference was like that we all worked in the same company in engineering. But at one point, you know, like it started that we had like people came in, or like I shared a problem I have, and I had the opportunity got the opinions of my coworkers, and this kind of like bonded us more. But also you don't have to face a problem by yourself, you know, like just to gain experience. And like this kind of like peer group system, even though I then, you know, promoted and stepped out of this group because it's like I didn't feel like I should be there, because somehow they are now my directs and the lead shouldn't sit in there, and this at least like didn't feel right for me. And this continues, and like in there like was somehow like tada, like a buddy program for my engineer managers, and they kept supporting, growing together, but also, you know, like you learn from each other without having all of them facing the same problems.
Oh, that is so spot on, right? Like, I mean, in the very early days when we were a smaller company, we had about 5 or 6 managers only. We used to go for lunch every day. This was pre-COVID, and also we would go for lunch, and I had these people who were, so I was very new starting up as an EM, and I remember there were people with 10 years, 15 years of management experience. So I learned so much by just being around in that peer group, right? That's definitely been yeah, thanks for bringing it up. I think that's a fantastic experience, right? To make sure that, you know, people who come in also get onboarded, right, during that period of time. And the senior managers are also able to understand, okay, maybe this person needs a little bit more of help, or maybe this person shows that potential that we looked at in the early stages.
Perfect. Does anyone have anything to add? Because I'm just aware of the time. If not, we can move to sort of the topic, which is quite hot after COVID, of course, but to do with sort of the remote side of working. I know I had two topics, which was one around how do you manage remote teams, and the second one was sort of how do you make sure your teams are performing and meeting their sort of requirements and deadlines. I know, of course, we can probably merge them together in some ways. So I know, Michael, you mentioned that your team do a lot of remote work, and you've sort of had, I think you said you had like a meeting or a talk about sort of the importance of people using cameras during meetings. I don't know if you want to sort of dive into that a bit.
Yeah, I can do it. So right now I'm at Interhyp for 1 year. Before that I was at Stadtwerke München. I went there in May 2020 when COVID started, and then we built up the team. So it was a full remote team for that story. But the camera one was that I don't think it's a good thing to say you have to turn the camera on. Once my boss said it to me, and I turned the camera off, and then every other conversation the camera was on. So I like more to convince the people why is it good to have the camera on. And 1 month ago, something like that, I had a talk with my teams why it's a good idea to have the camera on, to bond more, to build up trust and stuff like that. And after that, the response was very good. A lot of people had the cameras on. I also think in some weeks the cameras will go off again, or maybe I have to remind them another time. But I, for myself, I'm not the fan of you have to do A or B. And the other part at Stadtwerke was when the COVID get to the end. The CEO said you have to come to the office 2 days a week. And it was like, I have a perfectly performing team right here. We build it up remotely. Why should I tell them you have to go there? And I did the same thing. I did a workshop with the team and asked them why it would be a good thing to come to the office. And the team itself came with good ideas why it's good to come to the office. At the end of the day, it worked. I didn't have to force them because they wanted to go to the office to go to a lunch date and have proper workshop and stuff like that.
Great. So in terms of, I guess, like the overall consensus, from my understanding, most of you work sort of remote for at least most of the week. Does anyone have like ways that they deal with sort of, I guess, one, making sure that tasks are done by your team, and also sort of communicating effectively with your team on a remote basis?
One thing that I think I've read a lot, I mean, right now the literature is there, right? We have GitLab, we have GitHub, we have WordPress Automatic, all of these companies who are actually purely remote. So this has actually helped tremendously, right? And I think also moving away from a synchronous communication to more asynchronous communication has helped us a lot, right? So we used to have these face-to-face conversations, and we decided that we would start recording it. So our CTO basically started recording the talks that he wanted to pass on, and we would share to channels. And every time I wanted to say something to the managers, we would also record it and put it into our Slack channel, right? So they could see it at any point of time. And then if I had to repeat it again, I would just link it to the conversation over there with the thread. I think we're still not there. We're still very synchronous. But for me, I've seen that moving remote, the best part of it was trying to push a lot into asynchronous communication. So have a lot more things written down, use a lot more of Google Docs. So it's actually a little bit more deliberate in what you're thinking, and then put it over there rather than Slack. I'm not a big fan of this long, 80 conversations thread. I think it's so, I mean, the funny part is, I don't know how you deal with it, but if there are about 100 of such conversations and then you have to read this, it's actually time consuming and exhausting. So moving into a little bit more deliberate long form reading that definitely has helped, right? And more of these recordings. And I mean, in terms of the performance, I'm more in the thing of the school of, okay, yeah, look at what the outcome is. Has the team actually produced the outcome? And look at it more as a team. And if the team is actually meeting its goals, if the team is actually meeting its targets, then they're doing good as a team. Individually, I think this is where there's a lot of, I don't know, I believe I'm not the person who looks at individuals and more focuses on the teams. Maybe with managers, it's individuals, but with the teams, it's definitely more of what the team does and also evaluate the team, right? Because if one of them is slacking, the others are going to eventually come and point out, hey, okay, yeah, that one's slacking, right? At least to the managers. At least that's been my guidance, at least.
My comment on regards to performance will be that I agree with Sad that if you have good team goals, you can really assess whether the team is getting the output or not, and delegate to the team to really figure out, okay, if it is a fair play distribution of that work, or if there is someone that is having a free lunch. And in my experience, rather sooner than later, teams really push out people that are not really behaving well. And every time that happens, I didn't find any real, I will say, discrimination or not objective reason why that person should not be let go. So I think that, generally speaking, teams regulate themselves very well. The challenge us as leader is giving the team a real goals that they can achieve, goals that they have, let's say, the autonomy or the capacity to deal with. And if that's happened, the teams regulate themselves very well. And very, very, very quickly, all the people that are not behaving gets out of the team and on the company.
One point to add is, we have this collaboration tools, async communications, all stuff, right? But these are the things which are needed to get your deliverables delivered. But there are certain aspects like the relationships you build with people, right? And there's a lot of discussions which happen while having a coffee or while walking in the corridor in the office, right? When we were having physical offices. But nowadays, every meeting is a formal meeting. Everyone need to be booked in the calendar to discuss something. So I believe that to make teams autonomous or more effective, there should be effective relationship also developed among the team members so they can reach to each other, they can collaborate more effectively. So while we are all chasing our own targets, it's essential that those collaborative stuff like the team meetings or those events where they can build those relationships also need to happen. So so we do focus that we meet at least once in a month at least for a beer or for a dinner, and we talk about something outside project, outside work, right? And just listen to it, because often we don't know what is the people's state. I mean, there might be someone sick in his family, they might be going through some other stress, right? So knowing the situation of a person often helps to understand his situation, right? So the remote work, I think as leaders, it's also essential that how we ensure that this collaboration, this relationship building also exist. Because at the end of the day, we all know 10% of the things we need to deliver. Most of the stuff we gather from others as part of collaboration.
I will add to that I agree with you. What my team have done in the past, or when we start working remotely, is that adapt some of the traditional ceremonies to take in consideration that you are not having this informal communication before. Let me give an example. So you have the daily stand-up. So when we were on the office, okay, people meet before the daily stand-up on the corridors, on the coffee machine, and they have that informal, first day communication. So when we went to the completely remote online, we didn't have that before, and we just met on the stand-up. So what we did is basically adjust those ceremonies to take in consideration that was the first time we met on the day, especially on the Latin cultures that we used to really invest some time on that. And basically, okay, before the stand-up started, okay, people start like sharing some 2, 3, 4 minutes, no more, informal communication. And that really helped to recreate. Of course, it's not the same, but try to bridge that gap that the online communication imposed to the teams. So that was very helpful.
And another part is like with this so much using of Slack and other communication tools, right? On the flip side, few engineers or people who are a bit of introvert, who don't write that much, their efforts get unnoticed, right? So it is essential, like for leaders to identify that and recognize those people who are putting the real efforts in virtual meetings and stuff. Because for introverts who don't prefer to write that much or not so vocal in meetings, they don't get often they don't get the due diligence. So how to enable them and ensure that they gets recognized is also a critical part.
I would like to add my bit of experience over here. COVID time, pretty much a situation wherein literally everybody was working from home, of course, and there was no human interaction, and that was a kind of challenge. Everybody in silo, things though were being delivered, but there was friction. So there were teams who were trying to do their things in the right way, but communication between people could have solved that problem pretty much faster. Like before COVID time. In fact, now one email or 10 emails can be answered in just 5 minute on the coffee conversation with somebody. Just go over there, walk to their desk, talk about it, and it's done. And that's not there. Now it's a kind of hybrid mode. You can enjoy that kind of freedom, but that COVID period was not that situation. We noticed that. So I was working with my other engineering managers, junior engineering managers, and other colleagues of mine, and we recognized this particular problem. And we thought, okay, how to solve this? Because it was a first-time experience in our life. We are going through this COVID time, and this is the first time everybody was working from home. We threw that problem across. We did our retro and asked this question that, okay, how would you like to be communicated, approached? How do you know each other well? It's a new team, or there's some teams who are quite new. Answers were no. We really were a bunch of people. Some were senior some were managers, some were developers, front end guy, back end guy, but we just knew each other by role. But as a human being, no. And that's what was the problem that we saw. Team themselves self-organized on this. They said that, okay, we would be doing a kind of a team hour as per. And the whole rule was there was no work talk. It was bring something of your own, do anything of your liking. And that was a kind of hit. We used that for each team, each separate teams. There were 4 teams at that point of time. And just that, some point of time, somebody got this brilliant idea that we would like to introduce or invite some other teams in our team time. It was kind of weird. Okay, you don't know these guys. These guys work on very different things. But we did. And there was an ice that was broken that day. That's what I can tell you, because people were more free. They were talking to each other, although it was Slack, although it was on video calls, hurdles and all, but it just worked out because you gave that part to people that, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can approach people, and it just worked out well. That's what my 2 cents of experience about this whole work from home culture is.
Maybe before we run out of time, right? I think circling back to the very first, to the topic of hiring would be actually quite interesting, right? Because we do need to hire people who want to go remote, right? That's at least what I've learned, right? Because there are people who want to be in the office, who like to be in the office, right? And of course, there are people who prefer being remote. And then So we went completely remote first, and I think that at that point of time we changed our mode of hiring to looking for people who wanted to work remotely, who liked doing that, right? So, and then of course having all of the other experiences come along helped us as well.
Sorry, did anyone have anything to add to that, or does anyone have anything else to say? I'm aware that we have gone over the time I obviously dedicated for us. So yeah, if anyone has anything to add, then please do. If not, then obviously I can let you all go and enjoy your evenings and relax, of course. So is there anything else at all?
This was actually quite nice, actually. So thank you. I think this was a pleasant experience where I did definitely learn about a lot of things, right? And I think it's not very often that I get into a conversation with people of similar roles across different companies, right? So thank you, Danny. I think that has been the most helpful part of it. Thanks a lot, everybody who's here.
Yeah, I'd like to ditto on that one. It's been fantastic listening to the experiences, picking up on things that I do within my daily role, as well as to hear that, okay, I'm going in the right direction, like with everyone else. What are the challenges that everyone else is facing? And there's a common theme going around. So really, thank you for organizing and getting it operational.
Same way, Danny. Thanks. I mean, it was a good reflection session. We are doing the same things, but at times it's good to reflect and understand that, I mean, are we doing the right way? So I take it as a reflection learning session. And thank you, everyone, others as well. It was good learning from you all.
Yeah, great. Oh, sorry, Michael, after you.
Nothing more to add here. Thank you, Danny, for the organization, but also thanks to you guys to open up and for the discussion. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, well, thank you everyone for joining, of course. Yeah, I guess I'm happy everyone sort of learned something, and I guess it's good to know that everyone, although you're in different spaces and industries, everyone has similar sort of takes on things and similar problems, of course. I think that was sort of the main reason I wanted to do this roundtable, is just so everyone can obviously share their own thoughts and maybe learn something, and also understand that, everyone has quite similar things that they deal with. In terms of, I am going to be hosting one in February. It's going to be more focused around technical things, so like the future of AI and how that might affect sort of engineers working on projects, hiring, sort of all automation and all of those things. I haven't quite got it all down to sort of the topics yet, but I can obviously reach out about that if anyone's interested. But yeah, thank you for your time, everyone, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.